You want to take it to the top? Tippy? Yo. Welcome back to Live with the KHive. KHive stay live whether it's night or the daytime. I'm your host, Drew Comments. We're going to go around the room, introduce ourselves yet again for those who have not yet made our acquaintance, and also let you know, as usual, what we're sipping on. I can get off myself with a little Henny Black for the culture, y'all, for the culture. And then we're going to kick it to my homegirl, Reecie. Reecie, how you feeling? What you drinking on?
I'm good. I am not turning up tonight, y'all. No more martinis. And Live with the KHive, I am drinking Pinot Noir. I'm keeping it classy.
Keeping it classy.
Mm-hmm.
She's a savage. We'll move it on over to Maya. How you feeling, girl? What you got?
Pretty good. I'm drinking tea, and you can follow me as Maya T. Contreras on Twitter. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Hopefully that means she got all the tea for us today. Moving on, we got my homeboy, Kenny. What's good with you, bro? How you feeling?
Hey, what's good? I'm just drinking on a ghetto mimosa, child. That's it.
Ghetto
The mimosa ghetto. You gotta let us know what's ghetto about, child.
See, let me tell you something. I just threw anything in this. I don't even know what alcohol is in this, okay? But it's gonna work tonight. It's got to.
I mean, we keep being in ghetto. That cool. Ghetto just means getting a higher education to teach others. That's all that means, right there. I didn't make that.
Thank you.
But Heather, with an eye on the rose, how you feeling, girl?
What's up, everybody? I am drinking whiskey as usual. That's my go-to. And Twitter, Heather Rose Ghost.
Fantastic. Oh, and you already know what it do. Coming straight from the CHI. You feel me? See it. What's going on, girl?
Hey, man, what's going on, everybody? It's your girl, Sydney A, back again. And y'all know I'm Red Cup Series with it. You know, shout out to Prince, you know. And, yeah, you know, we're getting loose with the goose again this week. Y'all ready for it?
And yeah, I know what time it is. And y'all know what time it is, too. We're going to get right into all things Kamala, all things fantastic. First thing I actually want to do is kick it off with Kamala Harris calling for a federal investigation into the killing of Ahmaud Arbrey as this case has unfolded in the killing and, in my opinion, murder of a young man in Georgia who was stalked and essentially lynched by two white assailants and actually a third one who was recording. As details will continue to emerge, Kamala Harris has asked for a federal investigation into the matter, which is in keeping in what her background as a prosecutor into matters such as this. A lot of questions into the way the district attorney had handled the actual case. The only reason we're ever in this place today is because the video actually got out. The video that we saw on Twitter and social media was already made readily available to the district attorney. And even with that, they decided not to move forward with charges, but instead push the responsibility off on a grand jury. I apologize if I sound biased, but if you see the video, if you have not seen the video, when you do see it, you'll understand my sentiment. In addition to that, she's also calling for an investigation into the death of Breonna Taylor, 26-year-old EMT who was actually a coronavirus survivor, was actually the victim of a botched raid by the Louisville Metro Police Department serving a drug warrant. Initially, it was thought that the address on the warrant was wrong. However, the actual warrant that showed the address was correct. However, the intelligence is highly questionable. And so with that actual incident, police did get into the home. According to the lawsuit that's in place, they did not identify themselves as police, quite odd, believing that they were burglars. Another person in the home, Kenneth Walker, actually did grab a handgun and open fire in self-defense, wounding one of the officers in the leg. He is now facing charges for that, which is, what are you going to do, right? And in that actual exchange of gunfire, Miss Breonna Taylor was struck 8 times, unfortunately, and did pass away. And so it's a tough situation. I think that this one of the things that we are grateful for Kamala Harris, again, being her background, not only as district attorney, but also attorney general for matters that would fall under this umbrella. This is not something that's foreign to her. In a situation like this, where you would hope that a no-knock raid or no-knock warrant would be served with a little bit more intelligence, a little bit more tactical precision. We definitely expect a lot more from police in situations like that. But the blatantly obvious thing, and I'm going to ask your feedback on this one, Kenny. The blatant obvious thing is just being able to announce yourself as law enforcement. That's just standard procedure. Obviously, no knock warrants, given the details, okay, that you believe that there's drug activity. I can actually go ahead and let that slide. What I cannot let slide is that you're not announcing yourself upon that. Police, get down. That sort of thing. There should be commands given. According to the lawsuit, that did not happen. As a result, this woman is now gone. The actual search warrant itself, as a matter of fact, the actual drug warrant actually did name 2 other individuals. They were not in the home at the time. Police also did not find any narcotics whatsoever in the home. So you come up with absolutely nothing, except now you have a dead, innocent, aspiring nurse, EMT, who is now deceased. And so very, very tough situation for the family. The interesting thing, even when I bring up Ahmaud Arbrey earlier, is that we did hear from his mother, who has decided not to, interestingly enough, take the let's all get over it, I'm at peace type of approach, which in a way, and I hope I don't catch flack for this, is a bit refreshing. One of the things, and you're a Black person in America, when things happen, you're always expected to, well, it's going to be all right, by and by, trouble don't last always. But there is such a thing as accountability. We are a nation of laws at the end of the day. And obviously some of those laws are unjust, but also there are some laws that are unjust because they're not applied equally. And in this case, at least in Ahmaud Arbery's case, situation like this, death penalty should definitely be on the table. Now, here's the interesting thing, as I wear Kamala's name on my forehead, is that Kamala Harris has told you from the beginning she is completely 100% against the death penalty. As we move forward, some of us feel differently, and rightfully so. This is one of the things where, even within KHive, where maybe we say, we're not 100% for the death penalty, but then there are certain times when things happen, we're like, oh, come on now. And that's one of the interesting parts of just being KHive that I've observed in there. And I wonder, I do hope that the mother's allowed to express her anger and express how she is definitely feeling losing her child. And even with the additional information that's come out that the property that Ahmaud did enter and look around, number one, the actual video itself came out way after he was already dead. The 2 assailants, his 2 killers, didn't even see the video, didn't even see him leaving the property. That's one thing there. So that whole story has been thrown out. We heard from the attorney of the actual property owner, who is extremely remorseful, had nothing to do with any of this that was going on. Has tried to reach out to the family, has also been a victim of some threats as well because people believe that they were involved. But again, they didn't even see the video first. They got a notification on their phone because they actually had cameras set up. Obviously, want to make sure that nothing happens to the property. But they were one of the first people to be pinged. So unless these 2 gentlemen saw it, when I say 2 gentlemen, excuse me, these 2 people saw it. I'm not calling people gentlemen because I saw the tape. That's not gentlemen. But unless they saw that tape before the actual owner did, which is impossible, they have no alibi for that. The other thing about that we understand in the Ahmaud Arbery's case is that actual property is frequented by other people, children, other people visiting, just taking a look around, which is a normal thing. I've done it on the East Coast. We've all, at least one time or another, just browse, stop through, little window shop. Maybe even you're just setting goals. Maybe you're not looking to buy that particular property, but you're saying, ooh, that might look nice. I might want to get my bedroom looked at. My mother would go through neighborhoods like that and then get an idea of, oh, I'm going to knock the wall out. My dad would go like, oh, God, we got to do this now. And so these were the things that you had to kind of deal with, especially as somebody creative. So this is not new. So that whole alibi has got to be tossed out. Also, we know that the story that they had for Ahmaud Arbery saying that they were robberies or burglaries happening in the neighborhood, also not true. There was no influx or spike in burglary crime happening in the neighborhood. So again, that's out. I mean, at this point, though, we're going to make sure, we would like to see, rather, justice take its place and justice run its course. My hope would be that they die in prison. If Georgia decides to go a step further than that, who am I to argue with it? Obviously, if people agree or not disagree with the death penalty, they should never breathe free air again. That's just my opinion on that matter. Moving to Breonna Taylor, again, we're talking about police, especially in those type of raids. Intelligence is such an important thing. Reconnaissance, intel, who goes in, who goes out, the two people that you have on that warrant, how often have they visited the property, maybe in the last week, last month? What times are they usually there, that sort of thing. So when you're actually making that entrance, and of course you need to identify yourself as law enforcement, but also you need to understand what the probability that they're going to be there, what type of firepower may be inside the house, what type of narcotics are we going to find. Because when you do that for that raid and you come up completely empty and said you have a young woman, innocent, who is gunned down by your officers and now are going out of your way to charge men who thought you were intruders, and the NRA has been completely silent, it just, again, we'll be back to square one when you're black in America. And so it's an interesting situation. But Kenny, I'm going to kick it to you, man. What are your thoughts on that?
The thing I want to say is I just love what Kamala Harris is actually calling for. She's calling for an investigation of the actual department. And this is nothing new when it comes to Kamala Harris. As Attorney General, she actually advocated and argued the fact that all police officers should have body cams and actually keep them on at all times so that we actually know what's going on. As it pertains to Breonna Gray, it kind of shows that Black people aren't even safe in their own homes. I mean, we just had the ruling when it came to, God, let me think of the lady's name, Amber Geiger, that situation, the fact that she literally went into somebody else's house and murdered them. But one thing that I love about Kamala Harris is she's asking for accountability. And what that basically looks like is actually doing the proper investigation, making sure that everybody is held accountable. Kamala Harris is actually, it would be, if Joe Biden wants to pick somebody, I would recommend actually picking somebody who doesn't just hold other people accountable, but hold themselves accountable. Because even when it came to Kamala Harris, when she had her own Department of Justice, there was somebody who was tampering with evidence. Kamala Harris threw out over 1,000 cases because of that person tampering with evidence before anybody called her to do so. She also asked for, people to testify against the person who was actually in charge of holding that evidence. And she was trying to make sure that she held not just her own officers accountable, but she was actually taking accountability for it. So I think we need somebody like a Kamala Harris, somebody who's actually going to hold people's feet to the fire, but also take the same accountability. Because right now, what we have in office and what we have right now when it comes to the Trump administration is no accountability. Literally nothing whatsoever, no integrity. And what Kamala Harris is the embodiment of integrity and accountability. That's all I gotta say about that.
Kenny, can I just I'm sorry, I don't want to put you on blast, and I have to do a quick fact check on what you just said, because I think what you're referring to is the Deborah Madden case, and that was when she was San Francisco district attorney. And even though there was no evidence that she had actually tampered with evidence in those cases, Kamala went above and beyond on her own decision to actually dismiss cases just based on the appearance of impropriety. So that's where, she, like I said, she wasn't forced to do it. A lot of people say, and even Joe Biden actually in a debate had made it seem like she was forced to do that, or she acted in some sort of unethical way, but she actually took it upon herself in order to restore faith in the system, which, by the way, as district attorney, she did not have jurisdiction over the police department, but yet she still stepped up to the plate and made sure that when it came to these cases, and again, Deborah Madden actually wasn't accused of tampering with evidence. She had an alleged drug problem and she wasn't showing up to court. She was an unreliable witness. So that's really what spurred everything. But in that case, yes, absolutely, she did go above and beyond the call of duty and make sure that cases were dismissed.
Amen.
Amen, indeed. Well, that's absolutely correct. And the interesting part, I just want to put this just out here. Deborah Madden was not hired by Kamala Harris. She didn't start with Kamala Harris's administration there in the district attorney's office. She had been there a total of 29 years. So Kamala Harris been there 5. So she'd been there for a few decades before Kamala even got there.
And she was a San Francisco PD employee, not the district attorney. A lot of people don't understand those are not one and the same.
That's right. The lab is actually covered, or actually handled by San Francisco PD, and DA's office does not have jurisdiction there. Right. But we need to definitely clear that part out. Also, though, when we are mentioning Kamala Harris's just forwardness and forthwitness, if that's even a word, if it is, I've just made it up. But of taking accountability and making sure that even the appearance of some sort of shortcoming is addressed and there's accountability for that. We also can look at numbers, even in this pandemic, we look at numbers like in natural disasters, things like Puerto Rico with the hurricane. We look at things like obviously COVID-19, looking at any corruption in Puerto Rico when it came to actual aid, things of that nature. Even with Dr. Fauci's testimonies, how Dr. Fauci's testimonies don't add up or are not really in lockstep with what the Trump administration is reporting. They'll give us one bit of information. Dr. Fauci is telling us something completely different. And based on what we know so far, we're much more inclined to believe Dr. Fauci because he actually knows what he's talking about, instead of saying, well, you know, we have a lot of things and there's a lot of testing, it gets accused, and when you test, the numbers go up, and that's what happens, people. It's very simple. And is that Sarah? Is that Cooper? What's the girl on TikTok?
Sarah Cooper.
Sarah Cooper, yeah. And listen, the sad part about that is that this is actually real. There's no editing. These are actually real clips. If you haven't checked it out, please go ahead and check it out. But Reecie, I was wondering, would you be able to at least, even speaking to the death toll of what we're experiencing, and what does that, I guess, how does that really affect Kamala, or how does she approach situations like that?
Yeah, so this week, actually, Senator Kamala Harris led her colleagues in calling for an accurate count of fatalities and consistent statistics during this COVID-19 pandemic. And the reason why that's really important is because information, facts, science matters. And what we're seeing from this Trump administration is the manipulation of facts. So that comes in the form of, today there was reporting that Jared Kushner wanted to suppress the number of testing that was done because they felt like it would spook the markets if they had seen a rise in cases. We can go back to Puerto Rico, where the Trump administration drastically undercounted the deaths in Hurricane Maria. The information did not make sense. At that time, Senator Kamala Harris introduced the Count Act, and that was her way of saying we need to have an accurate death count in Puerto Rico. And even though that particular bill did not pass, what's interesting is that an amendment did pass that incorporated aspects of her bill to make the death count and the statistics around how they count for natural disasters more accurate. And so what we're seeing is another example where Senator Kamala Harris's advocacy and where her attention to these kinds of things is not just a talking point, it's a pattern of her attention to how these things are being accounted for. And that's incredibly important, that we have to have that kind of accountability, because unfortunately, the Trump administration cannot be trusted. They are manipulative of the data. And if we don't have accurate testing information, if we don't have accurate fatality information, then we cannot have accurate information that is informing all of these states on their reopening plans. It's going to hinder our ability to respond to these things. And so what you have instead is you have journalistic outlets like the New York Times and scientists that are looking at the normal death curve, and then what the curve that we're seeing is, including COVID-19, and having to say, okay, well, this is how much we think that the death count is underreported. But more important than the death count, we actually have a lot of cases. So that's important in understanding how infectious this disease is. It's important in knowing how many people are walking around that are asymptomatic. It's important in knowing how fatal this disease is. And so when Senator Kamala Harris calls for an accurate count, just like she did in Puerto Rico, just like she's doing with her racial disparities and racial and ethnic disparities task force, and all these number of things, it really, really matters. And like I said, it's so crazy just how little we can really trust this administration. As you mentioned, Drew, We saw testimony this week from Dr. Fauci, who basically said we're not ready to reopen, who said that you cannot just send kids back to school because we don't know how kids will be impacted. When you have somebody like Rand Paul, who's like, well, just send it back to school. What difference does it make? You know, and then you also had Dr. Bright testified yesterday. He was pushed out of his role being overseeing vaccines, who said that we're screwed, that the N95 masks that the healthcare professionals are getting are not up to standard. They did not pass, certain inspections and things like that. And so Kamala Harris back in February actually called out the Trump administration for refusing to send their officials, their administration officials, to these hearings in Congress. Senator Kamala Harris sits on the Intelligence Committee, and she called this out and said they had people outside of the administration who were testifying in this hearing. Imagine if this country had heard in February information that we know they were aware of, that we know Dr. Fauci was aware of. Dr. Bright was screaming from the rooftops, we need to do something about this. Imagine if the American people heard in February about what we were really facing as a country. And so that's where calling for the right statistics, keeping the pressure, keeping her boot on these people's necks matters. And it's not just her that's doing it, she's leading her colleagues in doing this as well. And so that's why we really, really, really need somebody like Senator Kamala Harris, because she has the foresight to see the patterns that this administration has. And like I said, she doesn't just show up when the cameras are there or when there's something in it for her to try to say, oh, I care about this issue because it makes me look good to care about this issue. Because I'm telling you what, it wasn't a whole lot of people calling for the Count Act to be passed when Puerto Rico had a bunch of people dying from the hurricane. Okay. And so that's where it's another example of her leadership. And I just want to put in one more plug before I, obviously stop talking, about when we talked about, her calling on the Justice Department, calling on William Barr to investigate both Ahmaud Arbery's killing as well as the district attorney and the police department for their patterns and practices, which is something that the Trump administration has completely done away with pretty much since they've come in office. But I just want to point out, and she's called for an investigation into the Breonna Taylor. I just want to point out, we all know, or a lot of people know Kamala Harris, Senator Kamala Harris, from her grilling of William Barr. And a lot of people probably are not as aware of the fact that when this pandemic started, she called for prisons and for William Barr to reevaluate releasing prisoners early, people that were low risk, people that were at the end of their sentencing and things of that nature. So, we know that Kamala is a badass. We know that Kamala will get in people's ass. And she actually, one of the interviews I saw with her, she had been on the phone with the deputy attorney general that day about this prison stuff. And so when it comes to an investigation, if Kamala's behind it, and she was the first senator to actually send a letter to William Barr on this Ahmaud Arbrey case, if she's behind it, then we know it's going to get done, period.
Before we get off of the death toll thing, I just want to just talk to you all a little bit about something. Like, I can't tell y'all where I work, but however, we got something today basically telling us that the number of cases have actually increased a lot more than what they're actually reporting. And I live here in North Carolina, and they literally call for us, because I work retail, they pretty much told us that we're not allowed to let anyone into our stores at all who does not have a mask on. So for those who are really not taking this really seriously, you might want to, because at this point, if they're literally telling us that we cannot even let you into our own establishment to make money, then this is some real shit, okay? So I just want y'all to understand to stay your ass at home, get you a mask if you can find one, make one. They got so many damn tutorials on YouTube, it's really easy. But literally, we really need to take this seriously, because it's only gonna get worse from here, because this administration doesn't know what the hell they're talking about and don't give a shit about our lives. Well, okay.
Sorry, I wanted to jump into, because today in Florida, it came out that they're suppressing the information that they're reporting on the cases and on the fatality. We've also seen, when it comes to these meat packing plants that are being ravaged by coronavirus, over 1,000 employees in one meat packing plant case, and they are being prevent it, or at least the state is trying to prevent reporting on that kind of information. So we see time and time again where the data is being manipulated, whether it's being manipulated through lack of testing, whether it's being manipulated and not releasing the information that is available. And so if somebody is trying to keep something from you, there's probably a good hint that that information is important. And it's probably a good hint that that's something that people should be fighting to make sure that we have.
Yeah, side high everybody, okay? Just look them.
Yeah. And the thing that I kind of question is, I mean, and I'm sure some of you guys can probably speak more to this than I can, but the first question that comes to mind for me is just, you know, when we think about the census and we know how important it is for, you know what I mean, us to participate, because that will give communities resources. I also think about, when we're talking about death tolls and we're talking about the impact in these communities, if we're not keeping track of deaths in relation, and also testing in relation to, you know what I mean, areas that are being hit the most, how do we go into these, how do we create relief packages that are being distributed to people that really need it? You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of one of the first questions that always seems to, like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So, I mean, and I don't really know the answer. I'm sure maybe some of you guys can speak more to that than I can, but that's just where my mind always goes. I'm just like, how is it that we're coming up with numbers and areas that we want to allocate these resources, but we don't have all the facts?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, number one, we always realize that in America, too often, the bottom line is the bottom line. And so, you know, meat packing, underreporting, and all of that is really just to protect money. We understand that. The other part that we can take away, at least from the last 3.5 years, is that there's one thing we can guarantee, is that this administration and the word accountability will never go hand in hand. That much I can assure you. Accountability is not in Trump's nature, and what we know about leadership is that attitude reflects leadership. I learned that from Remember the Titans, but the point still holds true. It still holds true, is that the attitude of the administration reflects the leadership of the administration. And the attitude is, I'll blame everybody else. I'll shift blame. I'll be irresponsible. I won't take any accountability for my own actions and deeds, which is interesting when that's coming from what we know as the commander-in-chief. But in any regard, that's who we are, and we need to survive, which is why people need to vote. Like Obama said, just his tweet was 4 letters long, 1.1 million likes, because it's that profound. It's that simple. Even though some folks try to act like they're a little extra woke and try to say, well, what about the barriers of the structural and the normative of the... Listen, these buzzwords, I appreciate intelligence as much as anyone. Journalism, mass communication, I love expansive vocabularies, and I love loquacious responses and verbose retorts. However, some of y'all are doing the most. Shut the hell up. Anyway, we're going to move on. Sometimes you need that. But in any regard, Sydney, I actually wanted to ask you, though, when it comes to just speaking of just accountability and observation, when it comes to, you know, what we're going to be addressing as far as helping people not be so vulnerable, or the most vulnerable, rather, in these current situations, like even if the children, immigrant children who are locked up, what does Kamala Harris, at least, how does she view that sort of situation? How does she look to address that in these times?
Yeah, absolutely, Drew. That's such a good question. And what we see time and time, well, currently, is really that Kamala is, you know, full front and center with, you know, demanding, you know, accountability. We see this with her demanding, you know, that, you know, in pushing, you know, for months that, you know, the Department of Homeland Security be, you know, show visibility in, you know, in the release of these children immigrants who are, you know, particularly, I mean, they're just basically trapped in concentration camps. And Kamala has, you know, been calling for the release of these children for months now, and it's even more apparent. It's even more imperative now than before. And we still see that Kamala is raising her voice and making it known that this needs to be addressed, and you just cannot sweep this under the rug. Kamala is acting and forming, basically watchdog groups within Congress, not just the Senate, but also the House of Representatives, as well. So what we see is we see her bringing a bit of her law and order background into her work, as well, calling for, these senators to, act on, these policies that are being pushed, and pushing, and pushing Congress to do the right thing. She's been a leader in that regard. And it's imperative that we have accountability, not just for COVID, but hurricane season is coming up. We see, that, not just hurricane season, this is tornado season. We see that this is wildfire season. This is natural disaster season. And to the point of Heather, we know that people are going to need relief packages, and we need full transparency. And it's not just going to be COVID relief. We're going to have evacuees coming from the Gulf Coast. We're going to have evacuees coming from, the South, and the West, where it's going to be major drought because of, wildfire. And, we're going to see, scientists are stating that this is going to be one of the most active seasons for hurricanes on record right now. So what that means is that they're going to be an uptick of smaller hurricanes and systems, but we're also going to see an uptick in major hurricanes, similar to that of the Ritas, the Irenes, the Marias, the Harveys, and even the Katrinas. And what Kamala is calling for is she's calling to ensure that our infrastructure is set for those particular when those natural disasters do hit. She's also calling to ensure that the most vulnerable of our nation will be protected, not just from those instances, but also from this disease. Kamala is again showing that showing her leadership when it comes to the most vulnerable in society, which is children, in my opinion. And those who are not able to necessarily, take care of themselves by themselves. We see that Kamala is raising her voice to give those people a platform, even if they themselves are not able to advocate for themselves. She is advocating for them, and I think that this is a unique. This is a unique advantage that Kamala has when we're talking about who should be running or gunning for that place as vice president. We need someone who understands those specific blind spots when it comes to making sure and pushing for specific policies to be pushed to the forefront. Kamala has this particular eye for detail that is, something we're really not seeing, particularly in this particular administration. I mean, it's completely the opposite. Kamala is essentially, the anti to, what the Trump administration is doing right now. She is the complete 180. She's the complete opposite. We see her, pushing, for, additional stimulus in the, in the House. She was the one who spearheaded the CARES Act. Kamala is ensuring that money is going directly into the pockets of the most vulnerable people during this time. So because of the work that she's already done, we may be able to spare lives that would have been lost, to those who are not able to evacuate. We're seeing that, they'll have at least a cushion, an aid to leave if they have to. And now we see her, continuously pushing, to ensure that, immigrants are taken care of, their children are taken care of. And in my opinion, that is what makes Kamala the right choice for vice president. We need someone, again, as I stated before, that understands those blind spots and can navigate those blind spots in a sensible way. And we see that Kamala is able to do that time and time again.
Well, you made a good point, though. you made a good point. And one of the things is that, number one, especially when it comes to pandemic, one of the things that Kamala has is an eye for detail, right? And so I remember she was mentioning, especially wildfires out here in California. But one of the bad things about when you were unprepared, you're already in bad shape, is that you literally need everything to be perfect. If it's not perfect, if something else goes wrong, it's amplified. And so wildfires are bad by themselves. They're worse when you're already in a pandemic. Hurricanes are bad by themselves. They're worse when you have climate change that is intensifying the magnitude of hurricanes. They're worse when your economic integrity is in question because of poor policy choices. And so then the fallout of disaster and aid and relief is felt by the most vulnerable. So your most vulnerable become even more vulnerable than they already were. And the people who were good now become vulnerable. We all take like 4 steps down. And so, no, like you said, it really is, what the part about leadership is being able to look at not just one thing. You can't really have tunnel vision. You got to have this wide array and see, okay, what if this happens, this happens, this happens. So if she's going to quarterback now as vice president, I'm still going to call her quarterback. I don't care. Look, hey, we going to hey, listen.
I love it.
Joe is going. I'm gonna call him the center. He's hiking the ball. She's taking the snap. Now listen, anyway, but you got to see the whole field. If you Steph Curry on the court, you got to see the whole court. You know what I'm saying? So when you
for sure
behind the back, I already know that that Draymond is over here. Anyway, but the point is, you got to see more than what's going on directly in front of you. Absolutely correct. The other thing about it is, though, when you're doing things like that, we know what quarterbacks, we know what Lamar Jackson can do. We know what Patrick Mahomes and Carson Wentz can do because the media covers them in a fair way. We were at least in a way that you were actually able to witness what they're doing. We know what Steph and Clay do because media covers them in a way you're able to witness what they're doing. When it comes to what Kamala Harris has done over the course of her career, as far as her accomplishments, what she's doing, or what she's done to innovate the way not only criminal justice, the only way we look at the most vulnerable, assisting people. I can't say that she has gotten comparable coverage.
I agree.
Especially when she announced her run for president, when you have incorrect or irresponsible media covering her. And we know that. I think the only reason we even exist is because of irresponsible media. Like, if they had covered her fairly, none of us would be here right now.
Thank you.
Well, you speak up for yourself. Now, I would have been around.
But I think seeing the disinformation totally made me be like, whoa, wait a minute.
Right.
Something has to be done about this.
No, that was a strong statement. You know, I made strong statement. But what I will say is that I don't know. There've been a few less videos I would have made. I speak for me on that one. You probably would nobody would know about. You wouldn't see my face. But Maya, when it comes to the way they frame her, wow, like, it's frustrating. It is mind-boggling, especially when it's like, yo, we've been in this country, 400 years, y'all still don't know, like, how to come back. But Maya, like, help me, because how dangerous is this?
I will do my best. I feel like I'm on TMZ when I drink out of this. Do I look like it? Okay. So all of the things that we've touched on today is centered on a media issue, a media problem, or what we hope to get from the media. To touch on what Reecie was talking about, obviously information that we're getting out from the pandemic. We've known since 2016 that Trump was never going to deliver proper information. So we have to rely on our media to give us this information. And so, for lack of a better, more succinct word, our media, like all other institutions in America, need to go through a decolonizing process. We have a very, very, very entrenched white media, and it's very difficult to dismantle that. And also, they have to admit that there is an issue here. Okay,
thank
you. So one of the problems that we have with the media right now is, because of that, they don't know how to change. Now, we do know that there are growing pains Jay Rosen from NYU, he teaches journalism there. He's absolutely brilliant. He did a wonderful thread, it's on my Twitter page now, where he kind of dissects and says what they're doing wrong with game framing. They're doing a lot of quick framing to get clicks and to get people interested. And that brings me to two of the tweets of what I had an issue with this week. One is with misinformation. There was a Time White House correspondent named Brian Bennett, who asked Jared Kushner if Trump would postpone the election. That's insane. It's insane that he asked him that question. Jared Kushner has nothing to do with that. He can't do it if he wanted to. He can't even ask his daddy to change it, and he can't ask his father-in-law to do it. It is in the Constitution. It is already set. Trump can't even change it if he wants to. That is something that has to be done through Congress. So to me, that was a massive irresponsibility for the media to do that. The second tweet that I was having a problem with had to do with gossip. It was inconsequential and was untrue. And it was a tweet from a guy, it was from a New York Times reporter, Jonathan Martin. He basically said, oh, Kamala reached out to two reporters, Asted and Christopher Cadago, who both covered and framed Kamala so irresponsibly for months. Christopher and Asted, you know I don't appreciate your reporting. I've said it to your face, and I just want you to know it. But what I'm saying is, he said, well, we talked to them, and there were some, which is why she had a few loyalists on her campaign in the first place. That's not true. It's untrue. It is wrong. It's gossipy. It's misinformation, and it's to get clicks. Now, let me say this. As I seem to be always trashing the media, I want people to understand that we really need the media. It's essential. It's important, but we need them to do well. We know there's been a lot of layoffs this week, from everything from BuzzFeed to Vox Media. So we know that there's a danger here. However, we do need to demand that they do better. I'm excited that Zerlina Maxwell wrote a book that's coming out soon. I think it's called The End of White Politics. Woo! I think I'm going to tell Zerlina it needs to be a 12 series, because that's not going to get solved in one book, but it is a start. And to me, one of the things that I would like to see, I hope one that Kamala's picked as VP, and if she is, I hope one of the things that she tackles as well is that we need an investment in public television again. We need to make sure that these massive conglomerates that have kind of basically have this massive monopoly on the media, where you've got four white guys in the back saying how things are going to be sent down and covered, that needs to be broken up, that needs to change. I hope that there's an investment in that. And I'd also like to say that it hasn't really worked in the way that they've done this. There's 100 years, you can look at the FCC, you've seen 100 years of policy that have shrunk the media, then it has given them, has deregulated the media. So we've seen that this is a process that's going to take long-term planning. And what I would like to say is, one of the reasons why we did the KHive, to reiterate what Drew said, and what Reecie has said, is because we need to have more, I wouldn't say political entrepreneurs, we need to have more media entrepreneurs, because it's so clear. One of the reasons why we all loved Kamala Harris, I got 20 seconds left. One of the reasons why we all loved Kamala Harris so much is because she was bringing in inclusivity, representation, and diversity. And you could see we were crawling through the desert. We were starving for that. We were thirsty for that. We needed that. And that's why when people go, why are you so loyal? Well, there is a reason why she's addressing so many issues that have always been there. It's just no one acknowledged them. So that's what we also need from our media as well. We need inclusivity, we need diversity, we need representation, so that these things that seem to be out of some white people's purview, that other people will know to pick up and deliver. And that's my piece. Thank you very much. I'll go back to my TMZ water.
Do you mind if I jump in,
Yeah.
Drew?
Jump in. It's double.
Do you mind if I jump in? So, Maya, what I do want to piggyback off of you of is what you call game framing and the dangerous game framing. What people don't understand is there's danger in the question, because the mere fact that the question is being asked makes people feel like it's a legitimate question, makes it feel like it's a legitimate issue. The same way that a headline, if a headline is framed a certain way, then they feel like that is all that you need to know. The same way with a tweet, the same way with the caption. All of these, the way that things are framed are geared towards, number one, like you said, Maya, clickbait, getting people to click on it. It's not geared towards the truth. And the problem is that once somebody has latched onto that question, once somebody has latched onto that headline or to that caption, it makes it 10 times harder to convince them of the actual truth. You know, people are convinced that Donald Trump can move the election. That is an objectively false notion. Donald Trump cannot move the election, period. Now, you might think that Donald Trump is corrupt. You might think that he's a cheat. You might think that he's a liar. All those things are true. Donald Trump does not have the authority to move the election, period. Neither does Jared Kushner. These are objectively true things. And so that's where people have to stop taking the fact that the question is asked, the fact that a headline is written, and the fact that a caption is written as the truth, or that it's legitimate.
So let me say, I'll say just two quick things about that. Is one, Roger Ailes, who started Fox News, and Newt Gingrich, who basically is responsible for much of our partisanship right now. Both of them knew that. Roger Ailes, I read his like 36-page memo, and he has a memo he wrote in 1970 that framed how he was going to put together Fox News. And in the memo, he says, people are lazy. Underline. So he knew right away how he was going to manipulate people through the media, okay? And then Newt Gingrich knew that if you just repeated things, little bumper sticker phrases, and he's the one that helped come up with the alliteration, the loony left, right? The Daffy Dukakis. I mean, he would come up with things that were, so people would just say it. So Newt Gingrich and Roger Ailes knew, Republicans know if you just put something out there, their base will repeat it. Democrats are less likely to do that, unfortunately, because some of us have critical thought. That sounds so mean. I just said that's so mean. But I'm just saying that there is a way that has worked for that. So that is why the media, too, unfortunately, has either consciously understood that, and that's why they know it'll get repeated. I really believe that they have their own agency, that they know that they're doing that when they're putting that framing. But it is all up to all of us to call them out for it, and to build money like Oprah, and then buy them, take care of them, and then dismantle it, and then have our own. But that's the plan. That's the plan.
But even though Democrats are less likely to engage in those tactics per se, aside from Jacobin and Intercept and all those people, Democrats are just as susceptible to those things. And I know Democrats like to think that we're the smart ones, you know, we wouldn't fall for all disinformation and misinformation, but the fact of the matter is that Democrats fall for the shit as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Ooh, Lord, say it.
The last thing I'll say is, like, you know, Reecie knows about horseshoe politics, where the horseshoe goes around and these two sides end up being similar. So it's like right, left, come around, and they're very similar. And that similar part likes bumper stickers, millionaires, billionaires. They like these kind of talking points. And that's why absolutely, it is left and right. However, we have, as Democrats, have been able to create something like a Fox News. There is just something different about a conservative, the way that the conservatives have built this over the last 45 years.
I just feel like we don't even have a liberal, you know, news platform, because even when it comes to the small things, there's just so much bias coming from literally both sides, honestly. I feel like there's no winning, especially when it comes to, you know, candidates of color. I just don't see there's no winning for us at all. Even with the LGBT forum, that was the perfect example of what happened with Liz Lenz and how she framed a particular question for Kamala Harris, but switched it as Kamala Harris, why should we trust you? Versus with Elizabeth Warren, how can you change the minds of others as you've evolved? It's just, there's so much biases here. And I just believe that when it comes to the media, when it comes to people, we're willing to believe extravagant lies over boring truths. But I'm gonna go ahead and get that back to Drew. Go ahead.
I'm gonna say this. Reecie took words right out of my mouth, though. When it came to it's just the question itself makes it seem like the actual issue is legitimate. When you ask Jared Kushner how, like, would you consider? He's like, well, I can't commit to holding the election in November. Bro, that's like me. Well, I can't commit to going out with Tyra Banks next month. You know, I see what my schedule looking like, but I don't know. I don't think I had that option, bro. Like, for real, I just don't. I would love to. Don't get me wrong, Tyra, if you're watching this, at, you know, SJS 856 through comments, my DMs open. But like, and Listen, we could certainly me and Tyra, just if it's an Instagram date, maybe a Zoom date, or we just talk, that I'm open to that. But realistically,
Wait. So are we shooting shots right now? Is that what we're doing? Because I mean, I
that
got a
was
list.
One shot. That was. I just kind of threw it up. That was like from half court. Now we'll see if I'm Steph or not. But no. But what I'm saying is, like, when again, you legitimize the ridiculous when you pose the question to begin with, and like that shit. Like, why would you ask somebody that question? And so, that's the issue that I have. Is just that people, like, the most ridiculous things are literally things that people discuss because they think is real. But in addition to that, I think that's the Playboy. Wow, my mind is somewhere else. Playbook with Obamagate. I'm sorry, but that's why you see Obamagate coming out. Let me explain something to Obamagate. I'm gonna explain everybody else. You want to know what Obamagate is? It is absolutely nothing. Obamagate is the crime that a black man was president of the United States for 8 years. That's what Obamagate is. When they talk about even the unmasking of General Flynn, they were unmasking. First of all, when Joe Biden was included in the unmasking, first of all, let's explain something. The Obama administration warned the Trump administration, said, yo, don't pick General Flynn. Stay away from him. No. Bad news. They said, get out of here, Negro. We don't have anything to do with you. Hush. The same way they completely disregarded the pandemic playbook and then pretended like it didn't exist until you got put on blast to the point where you couldn't ignore it anymore. And it's like, oh, I guess we did find it out. Mitch McConnell apologized. That was crazy. That's wild. I never would have thought I don't know if he could say I'm sorry, but he did. I must have missed that. And then Kelly McEnany tries to go up there and ask, well, it's just the one pager. Well, yeah, remember Susan Rice explained we did a pandemic playbook for dummies. Y'all stupid as hell. So we had to make sure it was on a placemat that you would find at a diner. Because if I don't put it in Chuck E. Cheese terms, you're not gonna get it. And you still didn't pay attention to it. That's so wrong. I'm usually not this divisive. And we're gonna keep moving though. But this is what it is. If I get enough people to repeat Obamagate, if I can get enough people to repeat about her emails, if I can get enough people to repeat Pizzagate, if I can get enough people to repeat she locked up black people, now if I get enough people to repeat what about the poor black mothers and black families she tore apart, people start to believe that dumb crap, and you just it's now you're fighting ghosts, like what Jay-Z said, I'm supposed to win, you got me fighting ghosts. Again, I told y'all I speak in rap lyrics, but. Moving on, it's understanding that when you've been hoodwinked or when you're getting okie doke and bamboozled. But and moving on though, when we have someone who is legitimately focused, like a Kamala Harris, who can kind of look past the dumb stuff and see, okay, there are still people who need to be assisted. There's in the current world now. I can't even have this conversation with y'all face to face because I don't even know if y'all got it or not. Like, to be honest with you, I mean, y'all look healthy and all that, but you might be asymptomatic. I'm saying. Look, you never know. It's the nicest person. Usually the folk who are the most hooked up, greasy hair on fleek. You know what I'm saying? But you might got it. I don't know. Corona might be bonus for your curls. But what I'm saying is, in a situation like this, simple things you take for granted. At least if you are privileged enough, and I'm telling you, if anyone here on this call has a level of some privilege, because of the fact that we're even here to have broadband access. Have these laptops, to have a roof over our head and clothes over our back. No, we're not privileged, but we have some level of fortune because there's always somebody who's doing less. The person who is able to see the least of these and folks who go without, like a Kamala Harris, who is able to look and see the importance of helping students and educators and then getting their education now that everything is remote. And Heather, I'm hoping that you can help me with this. What is Kamala Harris doing to address, at least being able to help the educators, at least being able to help students who are now in this remote world that we're forced to live in?
Yeah, I mean, this is an issue that Kamala has been focused on for a while. I mean, during her presidential campaign, she actually put forth a plan, y'all. She had a plan for infrastructure. And what she wanted to specifically do was invest $80 billion into expanding broadband access because she saw specifically in South Carolina, this is what she points to numerous times, is that there were a lot of students that were being left behind because they didn't have internet access that was up to par as their other peers. So maybe they did have access to the internet, but I mean, if all you can do is get on and check an email, that's not something where you can actually, you know what I mean, have a learning experience. So she knew then that this was an issue. Now when we're talking about, you know what I mean, and COVID-19, it's completely different. I mean, I actually saw so according to the FCC, prior to COVID-19, 21.3 million people were without broadband access. So that's according to the FCC. But there was an independent study done by Broadband Now, and they found that that number is actually wrong. It's actually 42 million people don't have broadband access. So that's twice. That's twice the figure that the FCC is reporting, right? You know what I mean? And so that was before this pandemic. Now, Kamala has actually spoken to, I believe it was the Higher Heights brunch that she did, after the CARE Acts had passed, and this was the end of March. And she actually, during that call, mentioned how this is an issue that keeps her up at night. This is something that it doesn't sit well with her, because she feels like she is concerned about students getting left behind, because she already knows that with our education system the way it is, there's already disparities. But now this is a situation where these kids, in many cases now, they're going from being in a classroom to now they're home. You know what I mean? So now maybe they don't have internet access. Maybe their parents are essential workers and they can't be there to help their kids study. You know what I mean? So, and she also pointed to with, I believe it was families where they are not, English isn't their first language. So maybe they can't help them with any of their homework. Maybe they can't help them with any of their assignments as well. And so I actually saw yesterday, this just so kind of happened to just appear on my timeline, thanks to Emmy Ruiz. We all know she worked on Kamala's campaign. But so I'm in Arizona, and I just moved here, but I saw that there was actually a kind of town hall. I think it was a virtual town hall that happened. If not yesterday, it may have been the day before. But there was a local community activist, his name is Luis, and he actually was sharing that they, during this town hall, spoke to 100 Spanish-speaking parents. And they were asking them about their experience right now with their children being home and what that's like. So I just want to run down a few things that he touched on. He said that, number one, they feel like they're struggling to help their kids learn during this time. They feel like the access to technology is a problem. So that may be in the form of devices, that may also be in the form of internet. That was one thing that they specifically touched on, because they found that even though they have internet, it's the lowest, the reduced cost internet. So we all know that is super slow.
It's running on the low bandwidth.
Yes, like there's, Kenny, you can speak. But so they're saying that what they're finding is that a lot of people are, or a lot of their kids are doing their virtual classes, they're dropping off of the class up to 10, 15 times because their internet is so terrible. And they also spoke to one of Kamala's concerns that she touched on during the Higher Heights. So, I mean, what is it, like 2 months? This is 2 months later, practically. Kamala talked about this the end of March in terms of essential workers and them not being there. Well, these are families, specifically 100 Spanish-speaking parents who have said they are essential workers and they are not there. And they shared that their biggest fear, y'all, is that children won't be able to catch up. So they're concerned that their kids are going to get so left behind during this that they're not going to be able to catch up with their peers. There's just nothing that they can. And these are families where, you know what I mean, they're already lower income. So they already come into situations where, you know what I mean, they don't have the most resources that are being given to them. And now the pandemic is just, it's like highlighting and focusing in on this issue. And then one of the last things that I just want to talk about is with the CARES Act, they talked about $30 billion. I guess they set aside $30 billion that would go to education. And so that money was invested in, given to the local school districts. And what they were doing was a lot of the money was going to online, to being able to take the classes and support the teachers so that they could do these online classes. And also purchasing devices so that students can use them. But the problem is that if these kids have devices, but they don't have internet, then they can't use them. They're useless, right? And so what Kamala has done, beginning of April 2nd to be exact, she sent a letter to the FCC Lifeline. They have a program, it's called the Lifeline program, where that is supposed to be for basically low-income families to have broadband internet access. So she sent a letter to them requesting that they expand that access and improve the internet, the broadband internet that was being provided, because again, it's low level. Kenny, broadband, y'all got that. And then the end of April, she sent another letter asking them to work with other federal agencies to educate people about that Lifeline program, because right now only 9 million Americans are enrolled into that. So a lot of people don't even know that it exists. And then last week, she actually asked that Comcast, because this is such an issue where there's lots of articles that are being written about it right now, specifically when it comes to Black and Latino children and how they're getting left behind during this crisis. Last week, she asked that Comcast open up their Wi-Fi networks, make them public so that kids around the country would have access. So these are just all the things that Kamala is doing. This is why this stuff matters. And it's important that people look into it, because it's not being reported on. You know what I mean? We're so focused on Trump and his administration and these stupid briefings that nobody is paying attention to crises like these. And when we're talking about, you know what I mean, parents are now having to be there for their children and play kind of the teacher educator role. It's important that people understand also that teachers, they need our support, children need our support. So I'm just very thankful for Kamala for stepping in and kind of bringing all this stuff to light. Sorry that was a lot, y'all. There's a lot to go down.
It's okay. The children are the future, so it's okay.
Okay, Whitney. I
was thinking more of the Brandon Johnson sexual chocolate. But what I want to pose a question. How many of y'all grew up in a home without internet access at some point in your life? Maybe when you were younger.
I had internet now, but the situation was it was dial-up. My mama would call me an hour ahead and say, I need you to not answer the phone and start the computer up. I'm going to be home in an hour. So that
exactly.
Well, I remember them days.
That was the next thing, because when we finally got it, it was like on a little CD. I remember we used to get the CDs in the mail, and it'd be like a 30-day free trial.
AOL, shout out.
Yeah, because we didn't have it, and it was like, it was difficult back then. Like, I remember I was like in 6th, 7th grade, didn't have internet, and our homework started to be, look this up online. I didn't have that. I had some old, somewhat outdated encyclopedias that my dad had, and I would have to kind of rely on that we had, and it was tough. So I know what it's like to have to, at the end of the day, after school. Thank God they built a library across the street that I could walk across. I got a library card, and I was able to use their internet to do my homework and actually get home. But nowadays, like when you can't even go out, I would have been SOL, man. And there's kids out there who don't have broadband, who don't even have dial-up, like, remember that? Like we had to wait 15 minutes before you saw a search menu.
Shoot, that thing was rolling back a few percentages. I remember you get at 99, all of a sudden 97. I'm like, what the hell?
No, but that's real. But at least we had, it take us a little while, but their kids with absolutely nothing. And you know what I'm saying? And people do try to say, well, they have these smartphones. Listen, mobile devices are good, smartphones are great, but there's something like you need to have a keyboard, man, like an actual keyboard. You got to be able to have it. A mobile experience is only going to give you so much. We haven't come so far along in mobile where it can completely remove a laptop or a desktop. We're not there yet. We're close. And so, for Kamala, to focus on the least of these folk who ain't got, who need help, I think is fantastic. That's want to kind of highlight. That's kind of want to do that poll real quick to see who had what. But with those kids, just even though you may not be connected in one way, unless or even with them maybe having different challenges, rather being connected through broadband, being connected through internet access, having the slower internet access and such. And even people make the excuse to say, well, they're on social media all the time. And one of the things they're able to view on social media is their favorite song, their favorite artist, their favorite music, and such. They're able to keep up with trends and try to raise that, which I think is a faulty argument. But even in that experience, they are exposed to ideologies that may be very harmful to them. A video came out recently with rapper Lil Boosie, who, let me say this about Boosie.
Send him to jail is what I'm saying.
We gonna send him. Go ahead, Kenny. Just take it away, bro. I'll get back. I can't. You go. I can't.
Damn shame.
Okay.
But okay, so just to close that up about the kids, a lot of people don't even talk about the mere fact that a lot of people are in rural areas when it comes to those low bands. So Kamala's been talking about that since the beginning of the election. But about Boosie, particularly, since we're talking about children and what Kamala Harris is specialized in as protecting children, but y'all have noticed is Boosie, he allegedly paid women to, I guess, perform sexual acts on a young minor 12-year-old. And if Kamala Harris had anything to do with it, Boosie would have been thrown under the jail, because one thing she specialized in is prosecuting predators. And one thing about Kamala Harris, she set up what is called the Bureau of Children's Justice. Before there was a children justice, there was actually what they called the Child Abuse Reporting and Neglect Act, which a lot of people didn't even utilize until Kamala Harris actually joined as AG. She understood the failure of protection of children. She decided to actually do something about it. One thing about Kamala Harris, she also wanted to talk about the systematic failures that were affecting children, particularly LGBT community, those who are literally in foster care, juvenile systems. And she also tried to tackle it by using social inequities and poor education to actually cause crime prevention, which she called being smart on crime. A lot of people talk about the protection of children, but we really don't do much when it comes to our children. There's so many things that we could actually have our children exposed to that we don't talk about. And Kamala Harris has always been about protecting children and protecting the youth, even when it pertains to making sure that they go to school, making sure they have the proper necessities to make sure that they're actually going to succeed in life. But that's just a few things that I want to talk about. I don't even want to get too much on about Boosie. We already understand that we need to start protecting these children, and these parents need to be held accountable for neglecting of their children and the things that they do to their children and allow people to do to their children. So that's all I'm gonna say about that. I ain't even gonna try to dig too much into it, because if you're a Boosie fan, you just gonna be mad at me, because I don't tolerate it at all. Lock his ass up, okay? Period.
Can I just jump in right quick, because in addition to creating the Bureau of Children's Justice as AG, as DA, District Attorney of San Francisco, she created the Child Sexual Assault Unit. That was something that had not existed before in San Francisco. As Alameda County prosecutor, she specialized in child sexual assault, in rape victims and things of that nature. She created the Center for Exploited Kids, or I may have got the words wrong a little bit, but basically she created an organization to help children, teenagers, whatever you want to call it, that were being sex trafficked. She also pushed through legislation that decriminalized, basically that allowed people, or minors, or people that were sex trafficking victims, to get their records expunged. They had been prosecuted for prostitution and things of that nature. So she has a long record straight out of college for advocating for child sexual assault victims and children in particular.
Well, and that's absolutely correct. And this is one of the reasons why it's so close to home, at least to KHive, when those comments. Kenny, I know you said you didn't want to dig any deeper, but I brought a shovel. So I'm going to dig it.
Lord Jesus, you got it.
Here's my issue. So let me explain something about Boosie, right? My teammate, I played football in college, North Carolina A&T, strong safety. I got introduced to Boosie on a bus. We were on the way down to play. I think we were getting ready to play Florida A&M. So we were going to play FAMU. We were driving from North. We took a bus from North Carolina to Florida. That's another thing. Anyway, my teammate who I was sitting next to, he was actually from Mississippi. He introduced me to Lil Boosie's music, and I was like, but over time it grew with me. Then what happened? When I say over time, maybe over a few weeks, it grew with me. What happened around that time though? "Wipe Me Down" came out.
I know the nigga can spell.
What you say?
The nigga can spell his ass off. BOOSIEBAB.
And you know what I
learned how to spell independent because of him.
That's Webby. Hold up, that's Webby. That was Lil Webby. I'm talking.
He was on the song.
Boosie is BOOSIEBADAZZ. That's me. Wipe Me Down. Like we get that, and that's the part of the song where everybody spells that out like it's their name. And so, for a minute, the music, but all I knew about him was the music side. So everything that part of him is what I was aware of. But over time, you get to know people, especially social media, how they really think. And he's been known to say some problematic things before. This is not his first time. He's been known to do some problematic things before. He's made some homophobic statements. He's made some transphobic statements. And these are things that you can be appalled by, but then you also have to recognize just because someone is a good music artist doesn't mean they are fully enlightened. There are very ignorant people who are very good at making music. Maya, I know you know some personally, but what I'm saying, we're gonna leave that alone. But look, what I am saying is the issue for me in this is that not only is he advocating or defending rather proudly sexual assault and molestation of his 12-year-old, 13-year-old boy, but it's the people avidly defending him that makes me worry, saying that, oh, this is how we grew up. Shoot, they did the same thing. Let me explain something, and this is one of the things that, and a lot of brothers watch this, gotta understand something. If you were 12 years old and a grown adult woman was performing sexual acts on you, oral sex, whatever the case is, even if you were having intercourse with a grown woman, you were being taken advantage of. You are literally, I'm sorry, no matter, you were not the man. Nobody's game is that tight at 12 years old where you can actively understand what's going on and pull a full-grown work. You just cannot do it. Not at 12, not at 13. No. Like, and I had, these are guys I went to college with. Like, yeah, we grew up like that too, man. What y'all trying to say? The other thing I had an issue with is this false equivalency and this false choice. Because Kamala's always warning us about false choice. This false equivalency between what Boosie's comment situation are, and somehow in the world, how in the world did Dwayne Wade's son get thrown into this conversation? I'm still trying to figure that out. This is not the same thing. I'm sorry. No. A young boy comes into the realization that he is transgender. It's completely different. Like that is not even in the same stratosphere as somebody. Wait, I'm gonna make sure that you. This is the issue with toxic masculinity right here. You are so worried. And this is the issue, man. People are so homophobic and so transphobic in toxic masculinity that you will literally go out of your way to sexually assault and molest and sexually abuse a child in order to keep them from becoming this thing that you fear. Think about that. That was the logic behind this. This is what I saw on Facebook. This is what I'm saying. It is disgusting. And the issue with this is this, and I explained something to you. When you were 12 and 13 years old, when it comes to sex, you can't process, when it's coming from a grown, you can't process these things. You don't know what's happening. Also, you're not even developed mentally, sexually, physically. You don't even know who you are yet. So when you introduce things like that to a 12-year-old boy, you are completely skewing and dismantling their development. So now when they get older, things like their sexual urges, they don't really have a grasp on understand. Things like consent, you don't understand that. Because what happened is when you were 12 years old, your daddy paid a woman, a prostitute, to perform acts on you. So now when I see women, I don't see an actual human being. I see an object. I see a sexual object. No. How you gonna come? You know. We talking about, like, see, so now your whole mentality, the way you even calibrate consent is off kilter. The way that you look at pleasing a woman sexually. So let's say that you actually do get in a relationship, and maybe you are actually in a consensual relationship when you're older, in a consensual sexual relationship. You don't even understand what it means to please her. You're about you. It's about your gratification. So now you suck in bed. So like, just this is that's the other issue of. So what's happening is, what may happen in this issue is a number of things. Number one, you either become a serial rapist, child molester, or you are so uncomfortable with sex because it's traumatizing because of the experience. Did anybody see Antoine Fisher? Anybody remember that? Like, I was too young to watch, realize what was going on in that movie, and I watched it again a few years ago, and I was like, oh shoot! Like, when he was being abused, that's why he was so unable to really open himself up when he actually did meet someone and able to open up. What's that trauma? And then that's why it's such a big deal. And then, I would have ruled it for. But listen, what I'm saying is that when you mess with a child, you are messing with a human being that has to grow up. You are creating a literal monster, somebody that might have to, unfortunately, be locked away because of the mistakes, not mistakes, but some stupid stuff you did, all in the spirit of toxic masculinity, homophobia, transphobia, and pure stupidity. And then you got people telling me, well, I turned out perfectly fine. No, you didn't, bro. I know you. I was in the park. I was in the club with you. I was in the gym jams with you. I was in the locker room with you. I hear how you talk about women. You were not fine. You were not fine, bro. Like, no. Like, so this is it. It's not funny, but at the same time, I'm looking at just these lengths that people go to justify abuse. I said, okay, check this out. Your 12 or 13-year-old daughters, are you saying that you would be happy with a 30-year-old man having sex with your daughter or giving a form of oral sex on her so she would turn? All of a sudden, the conversation changed then. We getting raw right now. Am I getting out of that? Let me reel myself back.
Yeah, Drew.
Well, let me just say something.
We got way down this rabbit hole.
Drew, let me just piggyback off of that.
But I appreciate it, Drew. Thank you. I appreciate what you said, Drew.
I'm sorry, but it had to be
so I'm in the minority here. Okay.
Let me just say this, Drew. When it comes to, but let me just say this real quick. So when it comes to everything that you're basically talking about, Kamala Harris is the only person that I've seen on this campaign trail talking about trauma when it comes to children and what that effect can have, especially being people like in the LGBT community, particularly people like me, who've literally been homeless because they've been thrown out of their house because of a particular sexual choice or a decision of something that they actually had no decision of making about their orientation. And Kamala Harris was talking about safe spaces for people like LGBT, trans, gays, literally people who are living on the street who would possibly go into what Reecie was talking about earlier, sex trafficking, because it's so easy to fall into that trap. And Kamala Harris understood that. And that's one of the reasons why I gravitated so hardly around. That's why I go so damn hard. Because, I mean, as a child, I'm not going to talk about my own stuff, but I'm just saying that those same pressures have also been held on me, particularly. I'm not going to talk about my own stuff, but I'm just saying I felt that same kind of pressure coming in. Kamala Harris understood that, and that was one of the reasons why I supported her and why I believe that everybody, if we're going to have a president, or we're going to have a vice president, we're talking to the future, 2024. But if we're going to have a VP, I think we're going to need somebody who's going to be able to speak to the trauma. Since Joe Biden, you talk about being the fact that you're so compassionate, somebody who's also has that same compassion that you feel. I think you should pick Kamala Harris because she shares the same compassion. She shares the same kind of outlook as you. And it's just going to make for a killer damn ticket, y'all.
Exactly. And I also like to say she's not afraid of having those subjects, and they are very complex subjects. And I think it's something that the media doesn't know how to cover or handle because they are worried about having those conversations, because it would require complexity. It would require background and understanding in that. So I definitely, is one of the things that I really appreciated about Kamala is that she wasn't afraid to have that conversation, to go there, and more importantly, to put it into policy. That's my favorite part.
Amen.
That's it. So, but yeah, I appreciate y'all rocking with me. Allow me to get that off my chest. I do think it is something we need to speak on, because I wanted to understand is that how accepted that mentality is, and it's a lot more prevalent than people want to give it credit for. It's not the majority, but at the same time, it ain't just a few folk, and that's a scary thing. So we need to be I just wanted to be that. I wanted to speak up for folk and just say, look, this toxic masculinity thing is real, bro. Like that's just. It needs to be said. It needs to be addressed, and we got to really rethink the way that we treat our kids, especially our boys. Here's the thing, right? I am so glad we're reassessing the way we look at our girls. We try to break down patriarchal standards and unfair standards and double standards and things like that. But let's also just rethink the way we raise these boys. So I understand we're teaching boys not to rape. We're teaching boys the value of consent. But we also need to rethink in our own minds what does it mean to be when you have a boy? What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a man? And it should not be predatory. Man and predator should not be equivalent. My manhood is not determined. It's not determined on how many women I can conquer or how much I don't have any emotion, especially when it comes to my physical expression of how I may feel with a woman. Like that's the thing. So I had to get off. Appreciate y'all rocking with me right now. Any final thoughts though? I think we need. we're gonna. I'm gonna take it off there, dog.
Drew, I just before we hop off, I just want to say thank you for raising your voice. I think that everything that you spoke to is everything that Kamala has repeated throughout her career. It's at her core, and it's something that obviously we're concerned about. And I mean, as a man, I believe that. I can believe that that's why you would support Kamala, and I think that that's an asset for her. Kamala is thinking ahead and trying to and trying to put in infrastructure that will assist the next generation. And we do need to break those generational curses. We do need to have a conversation about the ways in which we're parenting children, and we always need to reevaluate those things. Traditions change constantly. So things that were, that we thought were normal 20 to 10 years ago, that's not the case for this generation. We're steadily progressing, and we need to have an honest conversation about, the ways in which we're progressing. And it can't just end with a prison sentence. We cannot just allow, there's a large conversation that's being had about the place of prisons in society, in a progressive society. But what we're not having a conversation about is how do people get to the point that they're breaking laws. Where does that disconnect happen? And I think that that's where Kamala's strength really lies. We need to have a real honest conversation about behavior and just human behavior and the ways in which our the traditions and the sociology that we abide to creates a dynamic for people who for people not to be able to get help when they need it. It creates a criminal in a criminalistic environment, I should say, in which people feel like they have no other choice but to do what they're doing. And we also need to look at the ways in which we in which these laws are being applied, because that's part of the reason why we see so much aversion to specific laws, is that it's these laws are only for a specific set of people, and I don't think that we need to we need to move forward. We need to focus on health, and not necessarily so much punishment. We need to look at the root causes. We need to look at what comes first, the chicken or the egg. That needs to be the conversation moving forward, and I think progressives are leading that, and again, not just progressives, but a progressive named Kamala Harris.
Amen.
Trauma is the key. Trauma is what births a lot of the ills in society. And like you said, I'm just gonna put this out there. I remember when R. Kelly had his interview with Gayle King. R. Kelly lets you know when he was a young boy, the similar things that happened to him, what Boosie was describing, this is what R. Kelly experienced. You see what I'm saying? How they're developing, and you think nothing's wrong with what you're doing.
Exactly.
In reality, you become a monster.
Yeah.
Admit that. But again, just like Kamala Harris, the focus is on trauma. We look at it and identifying trauma, alleviating it, and we build to a better society. Any final thoughts, Reece? I know you got something to say. I know.
Yeah, no, I did want to point out that the California Surgeon General, Black woman, Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, she was the first California Surgeon General, but I was appointed by, I want to say Governor Gavin Newsom. Senator Kamala Harris, at the time, I believe she was AG, but she actually worked with her on a childhood trauma center. So this is something that Senator Kamala Harris has definitely thought about in terms of treating trauma. Part of her Back on Track Act was also about getting people, rehabilitating people. She's always said that crime prevention involves getting to these root causes. When she ran for president, one of her proposals was to put a nurse in every school and to really address these things. So bring it back to Kamala. That's what her record has always said, is that it's not just about locking people up. You get a better return on investment for society. Healthy communities is what she said, not safe communities. She said healthy communities. And so that is where her strong point has been.
Maya,
I just want to say something really quick. It's election adjacent. Tomorrow, my friend Tatiana Ramos, she's part of my cohort for NYU class of 2020. She'll be on MSNBC tomorrow at 1 p.m. with Dr. Jill Biden. Yes, I'm so excited. Yes. You know, we got to lift all of each other up with our accomplishments. Lift each other up.
I agree.
Move us up. Move some of them out. And yeah, and I'm looking forward to see what Kamala unveils this week, because she always is unveiling something. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's next and what's new.
That's it. I mean, it's always something. She's always working. They burn a candle on both ends. But that's it. That's her. That's her right there.
Can we have a fun question? I don't know if anybody else has anything, but after everybody says their final words, I want to have one fun question to close it out with. And I have an idea.
Let me make sure everybody has their final thoughts. Anybody have anything left to say? And then we want to get the fun question. Heather, what's on your mind?
Joe Biden picked Kamala. Don't play with me. That's all right.
Yeah,
Period.
Piggybacking off of that, I saw that there's reports that Joe Biden wants to focus on Arizona, Texas, and what was the other state, y'all? Georgia. And so I just want to say Kamala Harris, because you're going to need the Black vote, you're going to need the Latino vote, you're going to need Asian American, young people, Kamala
Native
Harris.
Americans.
Americans. We already know
folks that love unions, culinary unions.
We already know the work that Kamala is doing to raise awareness about what is going on during this crisis for Native Americans. So I'm happy you said that, Reecie. So I just wanted to say, if that's going to be their focus, then they might as well go ahead and announce Kamala. That's all.
Oh, but before you go, okay, KHive, I don't know if y'all know, but there was this recent poll that just came out in Florida with the #1 choice. So just throwing that out there. You already know who it was. Kamala.
Y'all already know.
Yeah, what's on your mind? Are we all good? Okay, Sean, that's all we need. What's the fun question? I'm interested, Reecie. What is this? Because now I need to know.
Okay, so we have another versus, right? I mean, I think we were transported to an otherworldly experience with the sisterhood of Jill Scott, Erykah Badu. Both of them won. The culture won. But I think it's going to be a little bit more of a rivalry this week with our Saturday with Ludacris and Nelly. So I want to know who y'all got in the verses of Ludacris versus Nelly.
Now y'all already know this is my territory, okay? I'm from the Midwest, so y'all already know this the Midwest swing, y'all. And I ain't got a clue why my color's blue when I got them things on that mop too. Come on with the St. Lunatics, okay? Baby, from Shy to the Lou. Y'all already know it's gonna be my boy Nelly. Come on, the Diamond, okay? The Diamond album, okay?
Can I make a comment real quick before you say something? I remember when Country Grammar came out, and I think the edited version was better than the unedited. Like when I'm going down, baby, up street in the rain, boom. That was way better than the actual explicit version. I'm just gonna go ahead and put that in. That's one of those rare songs I got in. But since you posed a question, I'm actually, and I love, you know what I'm saying, Nelly, that's my man and all that. But Luda, we talking about Ludacris, bro. It's representing the A. Welcome to Atlanta, jacking hammers and bows, back to the macking and jacking the clothes, adolescents packing the foes, and knocking the door. Who is it?
And let that be known. There's no disrespect to Luda though, cause Luda got hits. Okay, that's my boy.
No disrespect, but we talking about Ludacris. We talking about when I move, you move. Matter of fact, to this day, if somebody tells you when I move, you move, everybody goes just like that. That's like saying God is good. We say all the time. You don't even have to be saying, like, people who've never been to church be like, all the time. I know atheists like all the time. It's just like a response in the same way that Ludacris, when I move, you move. Just like that. It's just part of that. Move, get out the way. When
exactly.
You understand. It speaks to your soul. Ludacris gave us visuals. He gave us interesting lyrical content, entertainment. It was a show. It's a whole thing. The props and the big arms and the weird camera tricks. There is no the baby today. There is no the baby today without Ludacris doing what he did in the past. You feel me? So,
but also too, there is no Drake without Nelly. Let's just throw that out there, okay? We're talking about the one that innovated the singing rap, okay? Let's not give my boy his props,
let's
okay?
We're talking about a diamond album,
okay? Okay, come on. It's getting hot in here. Oh, and take off all your clothes. Say, I am getting too hot. Say, I don't want to take my clothes off. Y'all better stop playing. Y'all better act like y'all
Chris
know,
Rock, when
okay?
he was playing as the first black candidate to run.
Wasn't Ja Rule singing before?
That's what I said. I said
Ja Rule is a more long.
Ja Rule was.
Well, as a former Georgia peach, I'm legally obligated to say Luda.
But I agree with you though. I'm gonna go with Ludacris only because I know that as soon as he plays "Runaway Love" with Mary J. Blige, it's over for me because that was the song.
Runaway Love.
Yes, I was ready. I was ready to pack a bag and run. Okay.
Bye, Kitty. But then you can say the same about Dilemma. No matter what I do, all I think about is you.
But I think Runaway it pertains a little bit more to like what the mistreatment of little girls. Since people talk about trauma in children, child.
Oh Lord.
I'm just saying.
I got a big weed stash, pocket full of cash. Just seen a big on that. It's Saturday.
Who you got, Reecie? Who you got?
Wiki.
That's fine.
Because we
got Heather go. I'm gonna let Heather go. I'm gonna let Heather go.
Okay. I mean, so last week, like Reecie said, I thought it was gonna be an experience. So I was saying Badu, but then we got this Black Girl Magic moment that was incredible, and I was emotional last week. I was just like, ooh, that 3 hours, I needed that to cleanse my spirit. Okay, so this week I am really conflicted because number one, Nelly was the first concert I think I ever went to. I think I was like sixth grade or something like that. So yeah, that was.
Wait, what the hell was you doing at a Nelly?
My mom went with me.
Hey, Nelly for the kids. I met Nelly when I was 16. Okay, they cool. They treat us nice. Okay.
It was a Nelly and the St. Lunatics, I think. But anyway, so then you know what I mean. I had to get the Sidekick. Because little Sidekick phone, because of the Dilemma video, I was like obsessed, how to get that. So like Nelly like influenced me, but when we're talking about hits, I mean Luda kind of has a lot of them. So I guess, I mean, this is a versus, right? So I gotta pick somebody. I gotta go with Luda just because of the hits. It's the hits. But Nelly, I got love for you, but the hits though.
Observation. Kelly was typing into an Excel spreadsheet and wondered why she wasn't getting the text back.
Yes, she was. Yes, she was.
You hit me back. Of course not. There's a reason for that.
Here's the other thing. I swore for the longest that Nelly had a scar. Because of that damn Band-Aid for years.
But I I think he took that from what's her name, Left Eye. But
So that's right.
yeah, mute. I'm gonna mute myself.
He plays ball. He plays baseball. He has a baseball league. Yeah.
That's right. Nelly's an avid athlete. He actually got injured. He got his face scratched in the basketball game. He had the Band-Aid on for a little bit. However, what happened was his team was like, yo, this is working right now because of the positive responses. So what you'll notice, though, when it first happened, it was on one side of his face. After it's healed up, he moved to the other side of his face. And that was one thing. The first one is actually legitimate actual injury. Everything else of that was just straight up marketing. And I'm going to tell you right now, as a person that was in high school when that was happening, yes, you had, I was in junior high, my bad. We was in junior high, 7th, 8th grade, walking around Band-Aids on our face. We thought it was cool. Don't blame me. We had goggles on our head. We was coming to school with goggles because Usher was wearing the goggles. Y'all remember that? And you know what the problem is? You know why we did that? It's because y'all women were gassing us up, thinking about, oh, he fly. We saw the attention they were getting. So we did it. Coming to school with goggles on our head in the middle of summer.
Okay, let's wrap it up.
My bad.
Come on, wrap it up.
Reecie, end it.
Okay, so I'm gonna wrap it up, and I'm just gonna go with Ludacris because he's pimping all over the world. That's my boy. I mean, my freshman year in college, UCLA, they both were turning out hits, but if you go through the catalog, gotta go with Luda.
There it is.
Hey.
I'm the minority on the group here because I'm straight with my boy Nelly till this is Midwest. Okay, this is that Midwest swang. So
I think this has to be a promo right here. What happened? Because that was great.
Okay, we gotta wrap this up. Go ahead, wrap it up.
We're gonna wrap it up right now, like Saran wrap. It's another episode of Live with the KHive. Like I said, we stay live, whether it's night or the daytime, here with Reecie, Maya, Heather, Sid, my man Kenny, and of course Sarah on the ones and twos. Well, she produces, not necessarily ones and twos, but we do what it do. Like we do what it do. See y'all later. Take care.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye, y'all. We'll holler.